To everyone that is on, thank you for being here. It's been a long time. I'm very, very happy that Dr. Midwife is now with us, formerly Mr. Midwife, Nurse Scott. It's been a long time. It's very nice to see all of you. Life gets in the way, health gets in the way. So it's just nice to reconnect. And today's going to be about celebrating Dr. Midwife. He obtained his doctorate degree, so we're going to be asking him a few questions. Scott, not sure if you want to add anything.
No, it's good to be back. I know I've been away for a while, but I was happy to have the invitation to celebrate my friend's accomplishment of earning a doctorate.
And in no small measure, Scott did see my paper repeatedly. He did help me edit it, no less than a half a dozen times. And so at least he got a preview of what he's in for if he decides to go down this route.
And if I had like a soundboard, I'd be like, yay, and we'd play all the audio sounds, but I don't have that. Woo, I'm a Dr. Midwife. So can you explain to us, Dr. Midwife, before we get into it, there's a lot of confusion in regards to a doctorate, and the confusion is around like, you can get a doctorate in nursing, or what is a doctorate in nursing?
Okay, so before we do that, I do need to make a disclaimer. I can't talk about any other schools. All I can talk about is my own experience, and everything that I'm going to say is just strictly my opinion, my own experience, which was fabulous, by the way. So that being said, so yeah, you can get a doctorate in nursing. There's two ways to do that. You can either get a PhD, which is usually research-based, or you can get a DNP, a Doctor of Nursing Practice, which was invented about 20 years ago, specifically for nurse practitioners who wanted to go on. And you don't do research per se, but you do a quality improvement project during the thing. Timeline is about 15 months in my program. And so what it really does is it sets you up to understand research better, and it sets you up in a position where you're in a better position to teach or to sit on boards of some kind, decision-making bodies, things like that. So yeah, there's a couple of routes for nurses to get their doctorate.
Thank you so much. So the first question, and I'm going to see if I can put it in this banner. I'm so out of practice because it's been so long, is, let me see if I can show it. Okay. Can you tell me about your journey to becoming a DNP and what motivated you to pursue this degree?
So I'll take the last question first. So what motivated me was, and this can sound hopefully not disrespectful. I was raised in the family I was raised in. Both my parents, my mom and my dad, just only squeaked out of high school. That's not to say they were stupid or dumb. They were just uneducated. And so when I got into my early 20s, I was 21, 22 maybe, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to college. And if I'm going to go to college, I'm going all the way. I wanted to be a physician. One thing led to another, and plans changed a little bit, but I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to go all the way. Kind of a 60-40 split on why I wanted to do that. 40% was my own pride and my own self-accomplishment. And 60% was I wanted to clear the path for my posterity. I wanted to be able to remove any obstacles, no more excuses. I've cleared the brush, I've cleared the rocks. I took and cleared through the jungle so that my kids, my grandkids, and hopefully my great-grandkids don't have an excuse for not going to college. That's not to say they all have to be rocket surgeons or brain surgeons or have their PhDs and whatever, but college is absolutely doable now. It's just that. So, and then can you tell me about journey to becoming a DNP? So obviously there's a stepwise process, and I went backwards, or a little bit out of order anyway. I first obtained my Bachelor of Science degree in physical education many moons ago at a university in the West. And it became kind of a degree that I couldn't do much with. I had to go on to either a master's program. It's kind of one of those not terribly functional degrees. So I went back after that, and I got my ASN in nursing. Having been a nurse for about close to 15 years or so. My wife at the time said, you need to go on or, do something else. And so I went on to my master's degree, got my master's degree in midwifery and started practicing as a midwife. And then, of course, the school that I went to has it set up such that they're kind of the attitude that we expect you to graduate with your master's degree on Friday and Monday you start your doctorate. That's just how they have it set up. It's just keep going. And I thought, you know what? Here's my opportunity. I am going to go do this. And I knew that it wasn't going to be the easiest thing. However, the school that I went to was absolutely phenomenal. Went through, it took me about 15 extra months. And it was arduous. I thought several times during the course of it, I text my instructor, my primary instructor, said, I quit. And she texts back, oh, no, you don't. No, you don't. I brought you too far. You're not quitting on me now. And she dragged me through the rest. So it was brutal at some points, but it was very, very doable.
And you're juggling, you have a family. So when you're going back to school and you're juggling family, it's a little bit different than if your sole purpose is just school and you can just focus on school. You don't have to worry about taking care of children and all of that. And also, were you working throughout this time?
Yep, working, taking care of my kids. I got into the circular routine. I go to work, I come home. I go to the grocery store, I come home. And then because I've got slightly smaller kids and time is limited and I don't want them to feel abandoned, I purposely got up at 3:30 in the morning every day. Got up, hit the shower, poured a cup of coffee, and made my way to my computer where I'm sitting now. And I'd hammer away at it for a couple of hours until they got up, usually at 6 or 7 in the morning. I would hammer away at it. Behind the scenes, they wouldn't feel the impact of it. Of course, my sleep felt just a little bit of impact, but your body adjusts. And I would peck away at the computer, send stuff back and forth to Scott here, and I got through it. It was doable, absolutely doable. And working, yeah, you work your set number of days, and when you're not working, you're hammering away, chipping away at this thing. And as Scott always says, I ate the elephant one bite at a time. One bite at a time.
And I just want to take time out to say, Nurse Scott, I love your background.
Oh, thank you.
I love the lighting. I love the sign. I'm going to have to get with you behind the scenes so that I can get my own sign. I don't know how I'll manage that, but I want my own.
I figured I get very little money that comes in from my YouTube channel, but there's a little bit, and I thought, let me splurge because these are custom made. So I'm like, do I want to spend the money? I'm like, yeah, let's just buy something silly, and I'm very happy with how it came out. So I'm glad you like it.
It looks very nice, very professional, very clean.
I was kind of wondering why I was here. Except I'm thinking after my master's, I would like to maybe do the same thing. And I've heard Mr. Midwife, Dr. Midwife, talk about his program enough. Sounds like a doable program, something that I might be interested in. Things that I'm not sure I've asked you offline. A couple things scare me about it. One is the statistics. Once you get into those upper level statistics, that could be a challenge. I don't have a strong math background. And then really my only other limiting factor would be you have to set up with some kind of an institution, an office or hospital to do your project. And I don't really have those connections yet. So I'd have to wait till I got a job someplace or I knew someplace where I could set that up. You actually did it where you were working. So that was, and sounds like from what you told me, they were very happy to have you do it.
They were. Statistics, don't let that scare you. Statistics isn't terrible. And mostly you just plug it into spreadsheet and it works the numbers for you. So that was terribly convenient. You do have to have a relationship with somebody or establish a relationship with somebody. Some of the people in my cohort did it in the office. Some people did it in the hospital. Some people did it in local, community health clinics, things like that. And so it can be something as simple as tracking depression screening. And, are we tracking it right? Are we following up properly? Throughput of a patient through a hospital. If your first term, you decide what you think you want to do. Your second term, you go and you tear through at least 50 charts looking at specific points. Is this being done? Is this being done on time? Is this happening, not happening? And kind of lining up things. Then you generate a project. You discuss with your instructors a project that you think you can do, and they have to approve it. How are we going to execute this? How's this going to look? What kind of tools are we going to use? I ended up going through about 54 charts, discovered a handful of things, came up with two paper worksheets. They were just checklists, really, and followed those checklists through about 8 weeks of patients coming in, going out, coming in and going out. And every few days, I'd crunch numbers on the checklist that I did get back so that the work didn't become overwhelming. I'd do, again, eating the elephant one bite at a time. This is why I'd be up at 3:30 in the morning, so I could input the data, see what it says to this point. Next day, input some more data, see what that says to this point, and just keep chewing away at it like that. And at the end, you finish smashing your numbers together, divide by 10, carry the 1, and you come up with this is 97% effective, or this didn't work at all, or whatever you came up with. And at least at my school, they're not so much worried about you having a successful project. They just want you to go through the process.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what if you find no difference? Sometimes, like we say, like research doesn't get published unless you find a finding, even though when you say there's no difference between A and B, that's maybe important information to have in the world. But if you don't find some kind of significance, it doesn't get published. But your school says it's okay as long as you've run it correctly.
Yeah, and they just want you to go through the process. And, really, knowing what doesn't work, like you just said, is as valuable as knowing what does work. Because if you don't know if the negative studies never get published, we're going to keep repeating the same study and finding out that it doesn't work. And we're wasting everybody's time. We could be studying something else. So I'm just as happy to find it didn't work as what it did. Turns out I had an overall improvement of 97%. Mm-hmm. So that happened to work for me.
Next question is, can you describe a particularly challenging case you handled during your DNP program, and how did you approach it? I think you've talked a little bit about that, but if you have any specific scenario.
So we don't go case by case. We do the project. And the biggest part of the project that they want you to take away is running a team. You've got a team of 4 to 20 people, and can you make this team do what you want? Can you get them all on the same page? Is it bribing them with Starbucks coffee cards, or is it donuts every Saturday, or whatever it takes to get the job done? And that was probably the most challenging part, was getting my team to track these numbers long enough. And some of the comments I got were things like, "This is just busy work. This is just one more thing we have to do." But ultimately, at the end of the project, this wasn't as brutal as we thought it was going to be. This actually is helpful and not too cumbersome. So that was probably the biggest challenge, just getting the team going.
That's a good point. Sometimes when you're in bedside, I feel like they just keep giving us more and more and more and stacking things on top of each other, which is like, I digress a little bit, but just from the point of the bedside nurse, sometimes it does feel like that. Like they just keep giving us more and more things. So it's important to kind of balance that. What's the benefit versus the load on the nurse that, this particular project or worksheet is having us do.
And that's precisely, we actually call that a balancing measure. And you would track one extra thing that you would think was ridiculous. But is it taking too much time? Is it too cumbersome as far as paperwork goes? Is there some kind of, is this worth doing? And the one thing I kept harping on with my team is, this is only 8 weeks. We only have to do this for 8 weeks. And I count it down for them. Okay, we only got 6 weeks left. Okay, we're down to 4 weeks. Okay, we're down to 2 weeks. This is done next week. And just keeping that gave them something to hold on to. This isn't going to be forever. It's just a few weeks, and then we're done. And then he'll get out of our hair and leave us alone. So, which is what happened.
So part of the learning experience is not just the project, but it's also managing people, and that's
Managing the team.
comes easier to some of us than others.
Well, it's not just me leading the team, it's the team wanting to follow me. Are they all in on this project? Do they think this project's worth it? Do they even want to be on the team? And again, how do you keep them motivated? Starbucks, Einstein Brothers. I mean, what's going to keep these folks doing for you what you need them to do for 8 weeks?
I'm going to share in the chat one of my favorite books. It's not a leadership book so much, but it's called Influence, Science, and Practice. And this guy did research on how influencers work way back before there was the internet, even like salesmen and things like that. And there's certain things like reciprocity, you know, like when they give you a free gift and then, you know, just for coming in to take a look at the new car. And then there's this thing we kind of want to reciprocate for gifts. And anyway, it's a really fascinating book for anybody that needs to influence people or lead people. I recommend it all the time.
All right.
And Adrienne, hi, Adrienne. She was going to join us, but life happened.
Dang, life gets in the way.
Maybe next time. We miss you.
All right. What was that question up there?
Can you provide an example of how you use your advanced skills to improve patient outcomes?
So yeah, as a floor nurse, I don't want to sound cruel, but as a floor nurse, you look at you have your vision, you have your optics. As an advanced practice nurse, you see something a little deeper. You're able to see further, greater. You get your Superman vision, right? And as you're looking through that Superman vision, you're taking everything one step further in your brain. And so using your advanced skills to get more advanced skills, you say, okay, it's not just that we're missing the medication. There's a reason why we're missing the medication. And you start drilling down on that. As soon as you figure out why we're missing the medication, then you can figure out how we can not miss the medication anymore. And that's where you keep pushing forward and pushing through, and it just deepens your knowledge, if you will.
And I just happen to think your program is one of the few that's a non-clinical DNP. A lot of them, you want to get your doctorate and your specialty is like family nurse practitioner or midwifery, and then you have to do additional clinical hours toward the doctorate. This is actually, you don't do clinical hours, you're doing hours in the field doing your project, but a little bit different than a lot of them, right?
That is correct. Yeah, there's no extra clinical hours. There's no requirement for another 500 hours or anything else like that. It's you run your project, and you have to be on site. I think it's 20 hours a week, which is pretty easy. If you're running your project concurrent with your work schedule, it's no problem. And so it's just that those are the only hours you have to track is how many hours you're actually on site, and there's no clinical anything involved. It's just, like you said, running your project.
This question is to both of you. How do you think DNPs can influence healthcare policy at local, state, or national levels?
So DNPs are, I mean, that's exactly what the whole program, at least my program, was about, was quality improvement, making some kind of change, getting a team on board with making that change with you. And if you take that mentality into the boardroom, into some kind of political arena, into the state legislature, you've got to get politicians to sign off on what it is you're trying to change. You've got to get the CEO and the CNO and the rest of the people in the hospital or company or clinic to sign off on whatever it is that you're trying to move the needle on. You got to collect your information, crunch the numbers, present your statistical data that's got to make sense in plain English, and then take that into whatever setting you're in and kind of push for, this is important. I'm telling you, it's really, really important that we do this. And if we do this, this is going to be the positive outcome. If we don't do this, here's a possible negative outcome. Here's what it's going to cost us. And usually if you bring it to them in a financial cost, they'll listen. That's the big harmonic for everybody is money. It's going to cost me money if we don't do this. But really, I'm not a real big fan of the money thing. I want to know what patient outcomes are. And usually patient outcomes will translate into money, because if they go home and they're feeling better and their experience was good, they won't have to come back and spend more money and burden the system more. So you take that kind of an argument.
That's been my experience too. It's like they care about the money when they should, like you said, essentially, if we had appropriate staffing in beds, like on bedside units for bedside nurses, there'd be less turnover, there'd less be sentinel events, less negative or adverse patient outcomes, which would translate to higher scores overall for the hospital, less nurse turnover. Patients would be safer. The hospital would be making more money. But it's like, I don't understand how they can't seem to grasp that concept, and they actually try to like penny pinch and run the unit as bare as possible to save money, but that ends up, then they have to pay contract nurses or travel nurses. It makes no sense.
Well, and there's this thing in hospitals that if you discharge a patient that was in the hospital for reason X, and if they bounce back within 30 days with the same problem, you don't get paid for everything you did before. And so that's going to cost you money, because you just spent $500,000 keeping a patient in the hospital for the last 10 days, and now you don't get paid for it because they're back 4 days later with an infection related to what you did or didn't do. And so if you can spend the extra $3 a day to pay the one extra person to do the one extra thing, they won't bounce back, because the infection will never happen, and they'll never have to bounce back to the hospital, and you will get paid for it. So it's stepping over a dollar to save a dime. So
Exactly, yeah. And just from my experience, and of course, not every hospital or physician will be like this, but my experience when I was in the hospital is like, I just felt like they wanted to get me out as quick as possible. And I could tell, it's one thing that that's what they're thinking, but for us to notice as patients that they just want to get us out as quick as possible, like that's not a good experience.
Yeah.
I can speak from the non-DNP perspective. For the rest of us who don't have a doctoral degree, it's up to us to do changes too across, policy changes in our facilities. Or I'm a member of the local chapter of the Nurse Practitioners Organization, and they do statewide like lobby day, and they are involved in changing. There's a lot of legislation surrounding nurse practitioner practice right now that's changing and being kind of put into focus in California. And so it's real. And when I get enough time, I want to get involved in that and maybe go to lobby day and talk to legislators about the issues. In school, they teach us about translational research, or the ability to translate research into practice. But there's also translating it into English. And I'm sure even more so than those of us that are at the master's degree, at the doctoral degree, at the doctorate level, you're able to take complex information and hopefully make it understandable to the legislators and the lobbyists and whoever else that you're talking to. I hope that's a skill that gets developed.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, Scott, that I don't have my doctorate, I have a master's. So it's like, we don't have to wait till we have our DNP to try and make changes. We can always make changes, whether you're an RN, a CNA, BSN, master's, at any level. We should be advocating for ourselves, because that's the only way that we're going to see changes in this profession.
Yeah. I wonder at the doctorate level, though, we've talked a little bit about using the title doctor. Not that you've gone and tried to talk to your legislators or anything in the last month since you've been dubbed a doctor, but I wonder if that title opens any doors or gets you just that much more attention from the people that you're talking to.
Well, and you and I had a conversation yesterday, Scott. I've never been real big on using honorifics until about a year or so ago, and it just dawned on me that, and I had some other experiences, but it did come to me that those honorifics are important. For example, my boss at work, I have never used her first name ever. I call her boss. Yes, boss, right away, boss. You got it, boss. No problem, boss. Mm-hmm. It keeps me straight as to who's in control here, who's in charge. When I was practicing as a midwife in my last job, I wanted to be everybody's friend, so I'll just call me by my first name, and don't worry about it. And you're just as smart as I am. And I kind of dismissed some things, and that got me into trouble because at the end of the day, nobody respected me because they just saw me as one of them. I'm not one of you. I'm the midwife. I'm calling the shots here. You kind of have to listen to me, and without being a jerk, you have to set up that hierarchy, if you will, because. And likewise, I'm a midwife. I'm a mid-level practitioner. When I've got to go grab one of my doctors and bring him in the room and say, I need you to look at this for me because I don't know, I'm a little unsure what I'm seeing here. I need the patient to know he or she's got more knowledge than I do. We're going to defer to this person. Just like in nursing, that doctor, the title doctor does carry some weight. So when you enter the boardroom and they introduce you, they can either introduce you as this is Nurse Scott, or they can say this is Dr. Nurse Scott. One of those carries a lot more weight when you open your mouth and start speaking.
Yeah.
So
one of these days, maybe for me. Yeah. I mean, you just, you react to people differently based on titles. And I just wondered at that level, if that's one of the benefits is getting just a little bit more. That's not the reason why you pursue that degree, obviously, but it's too much work just for 2 letters in the front of the name.
Just for a title, but it does carry some weight, and with that weight also goes responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do open your mouth, when you do speak, you really need to have your facts straight because people tend to listen because you are a doctor, and you better know your facts and know them well, and you better be right about them.
I think there's also a lot more scrutiny on our profession. As I just got a comment the other day on my YouTube that it was like obviously sarcasm. It was like the US and their practitioners in quotes. So it's like our profession in general, when you're a nurse practitioner, is under so much scrutiny that it's like if a physician makes a mistake, it's the physician's issue, right? They don't scrutinize the entire profession. But when a nurse practitioner does something, it's the entire profession that's under a microscope. It's like, look at what this nurse practitioner did. This is why we need to do away with them, or this is why we need to do this with education and blah, 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 blah. So it's a large responsibility when you're a nurse practitioner, when you have a DNP, or even whatever NP you are. It's a huge responsibility. And you carry the weight of almost like representing. You want to represent the profession well when you're an RN, and for example, like when you're an RN, and this is a sad example with Redonda Va. I think she got a lot. It was a systems failed her, right? But they didn't crucify the entire nursing profession. So it doesn't seem to happen when you're a bedside nurse, where it's like, oh, there's a lack of education for RNs. It seems to be more at the like mid-level practitioner level where there's that scrutiny.
I would agree. I would absolutely.
Because it's new, I think it's newer. Nurses have kind of made their progress, and it's not over, but at least we're not what they used to call handmaidens of the doctor. Yes, doctor, no doctor. We've, I think, convinced the public we do something on our own. We solve problems and assess patients and intervene, and we've kind of got that message across a lot more than we did 20, 30, 40 years ago. Nurse practitioners, I know, have been around that long, but they've only now recently really become known to the public. So there's we've got something to prove. And doctors have always been at the top of the totem pole, top of the food chain. So you can't argue, well, we don't need doctors. Look what this doctor did. I guess we should do away with doctors, because then who are we left with? But yeah, I anticipate that being a nurse practitioner is that you're going to have something to prove, that.
Yep, that's for sure. And it's kind of like being an 11 or 12-year-old. You're in that tween stage. You're not a child anymore, but you're not quite an adult. And at Thanksgiving, do you sit at the grown-up table or the kids' table, because you're not comfortable at either. And sometimes as a nurse practitioner, even with a doctorate, you're like, I've got him and I've got her, and you're stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that. There is.
I'm sure it comes too with more experience, because as an RN, I don't have anything to prove anymore. I've been doing it long enough. I know what I know. I know what I don't know. If someone says, hey, don't you realize blah, 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 it's like, no, that's beyond RN level. I don't feel guilty for not knowing that. But what I do know is I assessed a patient and this is what I think. And, so maybe after all of us have done what we're doing for longer, I don't know, Brigitte, how long you've been an NP, but I'm not one quite yet. And Mr. Midwife has, you're embarking on you've just been leveled up. So you'll need some time there.
I think there's, and I don't know if it's being female, Latina, whatever, but it doesn't carry the same, like sometimes they will challenge you is what, for example, the easiest example I can think of, I mean, this could happen to anybody, but whether it's a diagnosis or antibiotics, right? Like this is viral, you don't need antibiotic, that there's a lot more of the pushback or the lack of, I would say maybe it because, for example, it doesn't happen in situations where I'm saying like, oh, I'm unsure of something, right? I'm not implying I know everything, but it'll be something where it's like, I know what's going on, but the patient necessarily like might push back, or the credibility is not, they don't necessarily rely on they don't understand the nurse practitioner role. So they're like, well, can I talk, like, for example, when I used to work at a clinic where I was the only provider, there was no MD there, right? We had a medical director, but, oh, so do I see the doctor now? And I'm like, no, like, I'm it. Like, this is what you're seeing,
Yeah.
The last question I had, I don't know if you guys wanted to add anything else, but what advice would you give to nurses considering pursuing a DNP?
So I don't endorse any program or any decision of that matter. It's up to you. I did it, as I said, 60-40 split for personal reasons. I wanted to have that accomplishment, that notch in my belt. I wanted to complete that for myself, but I also wanted to build a legacy for my own posterity. And so I've accomplished both of those just by getting those initials after my name. Is it worth it for you? I don't know. Is it something worth having? I think it is. For any of you who watch or are fan of Downton Abbey, Mr. Mosley, one of the butlers, and got demoted to footman and so forth, he eventually goes from being in service to being a school teacher, and he's talking to the headmaster of the school, and he makes a comment that I hope that he says it so eloquently. He says, I believe education is the gate to any life worth having. To me, couldn't have said it better. Absolutely couldn't have said it better. So just having the education opens up doors. Knowing how to read research, knowing what goes into the research that you're reading, learning how to influence people in a boardroom or in a legislature, working on a team that does that. If that's what you're up for, if that's what you really want to do, if you want to make change, the DNP may be the way to go. If you're doing it just for the title, it's a really expensive title. But if you're looking to change things and make a difference, whether it's just your own personal difference, your own personal life, or the lives of healthcare in general, or your state, your city, whatever, it may be worth it to you. There's a time commitment. Parts of it are easier than others. Some parts are absolutely brutal. Is it right for you? I don't know. I can't answer that.
One thing they told us when we were starting our master's program is if you have any inkling that you want to do a DNP, switch now, because you're going to take your master's level informatics and research and leadership courses. And then if you decide you want to do the DNP, you're going to take doctoral level informatics and leadership and research courses. So they do have BSN to DNP programs, and it may save you some time and money and headache.
I do think if you're considering FNP, whatever, you might as well do the DNP, because the only reason I didn't do it is because I had gotten a master's in nursing education, and then I decided to go back for a postmaster's as a nurse, as a family. So I was just like, okay, I just did this much grad school. Now I'm going back to grad school. I don't want to take another 3-4 years. So, but if I had never done the educator program and just was going for an advanced degree, yes, I agree. Just do the doctorate, get it over with, and you'll just be done.
And there's been scuttlebutt in the nursing community for a decade now or more, that they're going to require all nurse practitioners to have their doctorate level to be doctorate prepared. And so, is that actually going to happen? Probably not in my career lifetime. It may, but I doubt it. But if it does, I'm set. If it doesn't, then I'm better prepared for whatever. And so, and as I said, I can go into legislature, I can sit on boards. The other thing I can do is teach.
Mm-hmm.
You can go into university and teach nursing and so forth. And so that's just one more avenue that I could pursue if I wanted to.
Yeah, I love teaching. So that's what I would consider going back, just so that I could potentially teach. But yeah, so I vacillate, I go back and forth. But I'm done. Scott, do you have anything else to add?
No, not that I can think of. It's been good to talk about this because it's something I am considering, and good to be able to ask somebody who's been through it some of the questions.
It's nice to see all of you. You were going to add one last thing before we sign off?
Just you and I had a conversation previously, Brigitte, and knowing you, knowing your background and what your passion is for you, I would say go do it. Just because I know you more than the YouTube audience, than the rest of the YouTube audience. I know you a little better than some of us. So
now, for me, he says don't bother.
Oh, for you, you're going. If I have to drag you through it, I will. I'll help you write the paper. I can't do it for you, but I will drag you through it if it kills me. So.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We're going to try to do these more consistently. So make sure you check out our channels. Make sure you like, subscribe. Bye.
Bye.
Everybody.